Mingalaba! Welcome to the Webishop 2022 series on nurturing ourselves as peace builders. The United Board organized these virtual workshops or Webishops in response to Myanmar educators' request for more tools in peace education. They have realized that doing whole person education also means being agents of peace in their classrooms and communities. Each video has been edited for brevity and is made available for educators who wish to integrate peace education in their teaching. Once again, welcome.
So this week, we're going to go back to technical. Last week, we were really deeply inside ourselves. So I'm glad some of you have space for meditation and reflection this week, because as AA beautifully summarized, we're really thinking about how did we nurture ourselves? What kind of people do we need to be able to do peace work? So today, I want to share with you a theory or some frameworks that really comes from very deep research. So sometimes when I'm sharing these presentations to you, it looks like something I made up in my dream or some book I found, but actually today's frameworks really come from research. 2,000 peace practitioners around the world were interviewed. What is effective in making peace and what doesn't work? And 200 peace organizations around the world also interviewed what is effective, what doesn't work. So these frameworks are drawn from that research, and it was done by a US organization called Collaborative Development Action. They did research all around the world in different types of contexts. So I hope it helps us to do some thinking about Myanmar today. Many of you, since the first day we met, have been asking, how does it change? How does this change happen? Is what you've really been hungry for, is we want it to change. We don't want it to be like this. So there are some theories about how change happens or how we make change happen. And the first one is that we focus all of our effort as leaders, as educators, as peace practitioners, on very key people. What is key people? Key people are those that have some kind of leadership role, some power, some control over the situation. So if you were trying to change the education system, for example, the key person might be the Minister for Education. If you were trying to change your school, the key person might be the principal or the chancellor or the department head, wherever you are teaching. So the key people that we would focus on to make change would be those people that have some leverage or control as an individual over the thing we're trying to change. I think many people in the world right now are very busy trying to change Ming Online. I think you all saw this week the ASEAN envoy from Cambodia. He's been visiting Naypyidaw, trying to get Ming Online to think differently. So key people are those people that are really the ones that have the power to make the change we want to see. But that's not the only one. Then we could also focus our effort on more people or many people. So if you want to change the way that students think, actually, this is what this program is you need to train and teach a lot of teachers how to teach a certain curriculum, teach us perspective. So that's actually what we're doing right now. The United Board is offering this training on peace building to many different educators. So you will also change your way of teaching, your thinking, and then you will change your students. So the focus is on more people or many people. And we can do that in many ways. In many ways, it's something you can do with people in faith communities. You can do it through mass media campaign, through Facebook campaigns. You can do it through gathering people together and teaching them, all kinds of ways that we can change the thinking of more people. So the question for you is, really, does your work or the way that you work on change or peace or social justice or whatever you work on, does it focus more on key people or more people? I know many of you are teaching particular topics, but I think all of you sign up for this peace program because you want to do something more about peace. Let me go on a little bit more, because this framework doesn't stop at key or more. It also says that there are two other ways that change happens. One is that the very personal attitude change. This is the thinking, the beliefs, the feelings of individuals. This is how individuals see the situation. This is how people feel about the policy. And those key people, we would want to change the way they think or believe, or their attitude to things. So as I said earlier, some countries are trying to influence the attitude of Ming Online in order to get him to change the things that he's doing. Others are trying to change the individual thinking of different military officers. In your work, you might be trying to get the head of the department to change the approach to education right now, all sorts of things. So this is the change that you want to look for is individual. You might be trying to get to change the attitudes of all of your students. The second kind of change is a socio-political change. And that basically is like the law, the constitution, the political frameworks, the types of policies that are set in an institution. So these are much more the legal or political frameworks that people live and exist in. So we also want to change those. And I know right now there are many people who would like to change constitution. Some people would like to change citizenship law. Other people would like to change education policy. In the last few weeks, we've talked about the ethnic leaders would like to change the right to be able to speak their own language in school. So that's a policy, socio-political change that people are looking for. So we can also ask the question, are we trying to work for attitude change or individual change, or are we working for socio-political change? When you are consciously doing change work, are you trying to change the attitudes of people, or are you trying to change actually the frameworks and the structures and systems around you? So we want to ask, this is really, if you put these things together, if you have key people in this column and more people in this column, you might be trying to change the individual more people or the individual key people. So here are some examples of the type of work. Sometimes, for example, in Sri Lanka right now, there's a lot of work helping people to overcome their fear, their anxiety through trauma healing in order to help the country cope with the situation they're in. So the kind of work some people are doing is trauma healing. But also in Sri Lanka right now is a mobilization of citizens. That's many people. I think you've seen pictures of Sri Lanka with hundreds of thousands of people going into Colombo, the capital, to throw out the president, to change the constitution, to change the economic policy of the country. So this is more people, socio-political change. It's a real mobilization of citizens groups. At the same time, over here, we have people working on leadership dialogue. So in Sri Lanka right now, they have all political leaders sitting together, trying to think how to change the country. What should they do? How should they make this work? And really, they're coming from their own personal, individual positions and stand. But then at the same time, there is also a very formal negotiation about how to come out of this process, a kind of peace agreement process, a kind of way forward for Sri Lanka. So all of this work happens at the same time. So when you look at the research, and I think we sent you the manual on this, so you can do a lot more reading. But when you look at the research, the first finding they made was that change happens when you can move from one box to another. So what does that mean? That means if you can get a lot of people to change their thinking, their attitude, and then get them to act on that by changing the policy, then you know that change happened. If you can get a key person like the Minister for Education, he thinks or she thinks, wow, it's not that difficult. We could run schools with 2 languages, no problem. I will change the policy. And he changed the policy, then we know that change happened. So the objective we all have all of the time is, even if you can only at the moment teach your students, what you hope is that your students will then go out and change the policy. So when Santun said, some of my students are senior military people, some of them are in USDP, whatever, if he can gently work on their attitude, their fear, their anxieties, they might go and change some of the way that the military works. They might change some of the laws. They might challenge some of the things that they think are illegal right now. Then we know that change happened. So our constant framework is to keep thinking, okay, I can only work right now here or here, but actually what I want is for that to move into this box. We know that when many people pressure key people, sometimes change happens here in this level. So this framework is not to say we can always do everything, but it is to say we start where we are. All of you are educators. You have a possibility to influence people's thinking. So some of you are working in this key box, some of you are working in this small box, but what you're all the time trying to do is move the change into this other box, into socio-political change. So that's the key part to how change happens. The second part is that all of us are working in different sectors. So I'm working in peace, some of you are working in religious institutions, some of you are working in universities. We actually have to link our work together. So in the education sector, some of you would like to see changes. You need to make sure that you are talking to the other people that are also wanting the same changes, that you align your work with each other. And this is a very, very common problem we have in the world, is some of us are working for change and we just work on our own in our little box. I am here busy working with women mediators in Jakarta, and we can be very busy working and very effective in our work. But if we don't link our work to anybody else, then actually change will not happen. So you can be very busy in your classroom making change, but it would be more effective if you can link that to other people's efforts. If you can say, I'm teaching this student, you also have that student, let's work on them from different angles. I'm trying to change this policy, you are working with this director, I'm working with these students, let's link that together. So it depends on the change you want, the vision you have, but linking your work to others is very, very important. I'm sure that the United Board also is linking to other education facilities in Myanmar. So you can all say that, yeah, we are working together. If you remember when we did the Johari window at the very beginning of our course, we talked about the need to disclose, to say openly, who are we? What are we doing? In a situation like Myanmar right now, it's very scary to be open and linking to others because everybody afraid. Who are you with? Are you with this? Are you with that? Many of you in this room will still feel nervous being in this room together because you don't know who is that person. Are they going to share what I said? Is it safe? So this practice of disclosing and linking to others is more difficult in a situation where people are afraid, but is very, very important if you're going to make an effective change. So linkages are really important. If we don't link together, this is what happens. We start pulling in opposite directions. And so you might be thinking you're working on something very good. I'm working on something very good, but actually our work not aligned can actually make more difficult. So if you were trying to affect change in education right now, in the curriculum, in the policy, in how you protect your students, in any of these areas, you could actually be more effective if you were coming and sharing, this is what I'm doing, this is what I'm doing. Let's try and make it more effective together. I hope this framework helps you to think in a different way or a more intentional way each time you're trying to do influencing, or you're trying to work with your students, or you're trying to work with people above you, is to use the time wisely. Sometimes we think we have 50 years to make change. And one of you said, change, yes, it takes time. It takes time. It does. But also, we don't really have time. And next week, we're going to talk a little bit about that, is how can we be even more effective in trying to move change quicker? Because actually the people can't wait for change. Your students can't wait for change. Your own lives, your own children, your own grandchildren can't wait for change. So how can we be the most effective as change makers in all of the work that we do? That's what we'll look at a little bit more next week. I want to give you just something to think about for this week. So this is, again, from the research. It's the 5 things that really have to change if we know that we're going to affect change in the whole system. And again, we're going to come back to this a little bit next week. I hope you can see this. Let me put properly. Next week, we're going to look at this, how to be effective, but not how to be effective in your project. At the moment, we are in a United Board project. So this is effective. You are evaluating week to week. How is the training? How is your feeling? How is the technology? That is a kind of program effectiveness. But the questions we want to ask is, what about peace effectiveness? How effective are we being in making peace? So this is something we're going to come back to. But there are 5 things that when they change, we know real change happened. And the last couple of weeks, we talked a little bit about the peace process in Myanmar, and I told you to be aware of the peace accords. Sometimes things look like change when they're not real change. And somehow we know that that's how we end up in this situation in Myanmar now. Is in 2011, Thein Sein's government made a lot of changes, and we were very excited that Myanmar was opening up to the world, that there were elections and so on and so on. But there were some things, as we discussed in the first week, that didn't change, which prevented a real change. And one of them is the military's role inside the political system. So I just want to introduce you to these 5 elements. The first one is already on the screen. The first one is the effort or the work that we do results in the creation or formation, the creation or reform of political institutions that handle grievances. When those grievances are what drives the conflict. So that's a bit complicated. Basically, it means that we have created institutions or reformed institutions which address what makes the conflict. Well, a big example is the change in a constitution. That when people are frustrated that they don't have rights, they don't have power, they don't have fair political control, they don't have a fair justice system, then they will take up guns, they will fight. So we discussed last week the ethnic people who are frustrated about their rights in Myanmar. So over 70 years, they took up the guns to fight for their rights. So we could end that conflict by reforming some policies like education policy, language policy, constitution, some state parliament legislations. These are things that would make ethnic people satisfied and enough to put down their guns. So we know that real peace can happen when we can change or instigate new political institutions that satisfy people, that make them feel safe. If you are frustrated with the election, if you don't think there was a fair election, you can have an independent election commission that investigates the election. This is another way that grievances can be handled. If in Cambodia we have so much corruption, so now we have an independent corruption commission, and actually it's quite solid. It's really investigating and holding people to account for serious corruption. So that's making people very happy. They feel that finally there's some justice. So this one is a very critical one that we need to pay attention to if we're really bringing about a real peace. The second one is that people themselves take up the momentum or the movement for peace. So people become active, not in violence, but in bringing about a change in the country, in their own communities. So in some communities, they're mixed. They might have Muslims and Buddhists living together. I remember, honestly, in 2012, there was some very terrible violence in Shui Bo, near Mandalay. And some communities, when the Muslims and the Buddhists stood together, they said that, no, we will not have violence in this community. You cannot burn these houses. So in those communities, a real peace was very strong. The community itself was peaceful. But in the communities where the gangs came to burn the houses of Muslims and Buddhists stood back and said, okay, it's your problem, not our problem, it really escalated into a very big violence. So we can see that when people, ordinary people, choose to resist or go against or build their own momentum for peace, this is a really positive factor. We can see in some communities now that people are helping each other. I know there are Arakanese communities that have been feeding Rohingya communities, these kinds of things. So these efforts are where the real peace is, because people are going beyond the conflict, they're going past the issues, and they're really standing together. So this one is very critical. It's nothing to do with peace talks, with presidents, with military commanders. This is about people themselves making peace. The third one is that people resist violence. So I kind of give example of that already, is that people say, no, we will not participate in this violence. We will not give information that leads to violence. We will not allow you to take people, but we will not respond with violence either. So we know that conflict is always there, but the use of violence always becomes more problematic. We can understand in this situation that many people feel to protect themselves, they have to take guns, they have to find some way to protect themselves. But actually, if there is a way to do without violence, it's much more powerful. I think many of you can remember the early days of the coup, the very creative, huge protests that people have that really send a message to those coup makers. This is unacceptable. To be very honest, we understand Ming Online was really shocked. He thought that people will be very supportive what he did to save the country from NLD, but actually he was shocked. Why are the people so much on the street protesting? So that's when the violence happened. But in the beginning, the people really resisted the need to turn into violence. So this is very powerful and important step. The fourth one is that people feel secure. And right now, most of your stories, people don't feel safe. They feel afraid all of the time. They feel afraid who is listening, who is watching me, Will my family be affected? What will happen to our economy? Do we have food? Can we get fuel? If I speak against something, will people report me? Many, many things that make you feel afraid right now. And that's why we know that this is a really serious situation of conflict and violence. So how can we make people feel more safe? Actually, if you observe our training in the last 5 weeks, all of you are feeling more and more safe in this community. In the beginning, in the first week we are together, most of you don't say anything. You keep a little bit quiet. But as you're listening, as you're knowing each other, we are feeling more and more safe. We are a bit more bold what we feel we can talk about. So actually, that's a sense of security. In this Zoom room with these people, you have some sense that you are safe. So what we want to do that all the time. Can you make a safe classroom? Can you make a safe community around you? Can you link up with others that will make you feel real trust and real safety? That will help expand the resistance of fear, the pervasion of fear. Fear is always coming in and making you feel horrible, lose your energy, lose your emotion, all of these things. So how can we help your students, your colleagues, your family, all of those around you feel safe? And notice it says not just they are safe, but that they feel safe, their sense of security. We might not be safe, but sometimes we can increase that feeling that we are going to be okay. We can make this through. We can work with each other. We can protect one another. So this one is also important, security. And the last one, again, a little bit like from the Schwebo example, is that there's a real meaningful improvement in the intergroup relationship, that people are really feeling, despite religious difference, despite ethnic difference, they can be together. So actually in this Zoom room, some of you are Buddhist, some of you are Christian. I don't know if we have any Muslim here, but you are together. Some of you talk, you're going to temple, some of you are going to church. That's okay, because you are really saying that religion is not going to divide you. You are together. You're all Myanmar people. You are educators. You have passion for education. So that's a very powerful indicator that you are together. So the way that we know peace is more likely or is improving is when we have 2 or more of these things. If people feel safe and they're interacting across group, that's good for them. I remember last week we talked about the classroom of the NLD and the USDP together. It's also very powerful if they can be talking to each other without violence, without feeling insecure. That's a very safe place, but also a place they can really learn to become friends, even they have political differences. That's a very strong indicator for peace. So this is what we are looking for all the time, is no violence, intergroup relations, a sense of security. The people are doing this themselves. It's not something imported from an envoy, from an international NGO, but this is really the people's movement. This is something very strong in Myanmar. People really like to do themselves. And that actually the systems, the structures, the laws, the institutions are really addressing the grievances or the frustrations of people. So I just want to share with you one video that we made about this kind of thinking. It's a little bit of a story. It takes 4 minutes. Thank you for watching. I wanted to show you this little story, inspiring story, because it's only little community. It's just one monk and some Muslims and some Christians together, but never mind all the situation. At least they are people's taking their own initiative. They are mixing across groups. They are finding mechanisms to combat the rumors and to make each other feel more secure. So even though we see these big things, we have to change the system and we have to make security and we have to build the people's movement, it doesn't have to be a big thing. It can be these small initiatives in your classroom, in your community, in your religious group that you can try to make significant change in those spaces. So I hope that you don't feel overwhelmed sometime when we are talking, we have to change all these things, but that actually you can see from the example of the monk and his community that he draw on all the traditions from the past, all the crazy history of his community. Is a very beautiful thing about Myanmar is that you are very diverse and you have a long history of living peacefully together. You're having a difficult time now, but mostly Myanmar has a history of living peacefully together. So let me stop here for today. I think there is a lot of reading. I hope some of you read a letter to young mediators. I think you are all young mediators here. Bye, everybody. Take care.